All right, excellent. We're seeing that many people have found sources of caffeination. That's excellent. Take another minute to get a beverage or something, and then we will introduce our panelists and continue with our session for the afternoon. I will be moderating our two panels before we get then to your roundtable discussions, which is why there are numbers on the roundtables. Okay, please come back to your tables and we will get into our discussion with our panel here. Okay, a welcome announcement has just been delivered to me, which is there is actually more food coming for the break, so this is not your last chance. As we said earlier, survival is a good goal. It shouldn't be the only one, but it's a good one. And and there will be more beverages as well. So let us progress now with more discussion, building on these themes that we've had here so far, and then we'll take there'll be a brief break between the two the two panels, I should say. So our focus is, as Dean Griffenhagen has just mentioned, is for this panel is university community engagement, sort of the institutional level. And we've invited each of these panelists. We told them ahead of time what the questions are. There are 3 questions that we'll give each of them about 5 minutes to share some observations and thoughts, and then we'll get a little bit of interaction and building on what each of them has shared. So what we asked them to talk about is from each of them from their own perspective and experience. Everybody brings their own. How can the university contribute to community success? How can we work to meet all the needs of our community? How might we do this? And what factors are particularly important to consider in doing this work? Each of those are things that seem to us to be particularly significant to get insights, and so I'd like to invite our panelists to discuss this. Now, our panelists, as you know, if you see the agenda, our panelists are Noel Starblanket, our knowledge keeper and life speaker who shared his talents with us at the beginning of the session with the smudging session. We also have Patricia Elliot, who's the associate professor and director of the community research unit at the University of Regina and the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Unfortunately, Wallace Lockhart actually is ill, and so he is not able to join us. One of the things he was going to talk about was a program called Enactus, and we'll have the privilege of hearing from a couple of students in that program later on in the second panel. In addition, we have Bettina Schneider, whom you've also heard from, but she is Associate Professor, Department of Indigenous Science at First Nations University. And we have Rhonda Rosenberg, who's the Executive Director of the Multicultural Council of Saskatchewan. As I mentioned, we're asking them how can the university work to contribute to community success and how can we work to do this? Mr. Starblanket, perhaps I could start with you and we could just invite each person to share a few minutes of thought and then we'll get interaction on top of that. And I'll check your microphone, but I think it should be working. Is your microphone working? I'm going to time you. We're looking for about 5 minutes.
Just 4 minutes.
4 minutes? Okay.
Okay. If you give me a microphone, I can talk to you all day. So I'll try to keep my remarks brief. For the voluntary people, for the academics, I'm not an academic. And in fact, I have criticized academics for their profuse verbology about everything from community development to reconciliation. And it's simply me expressing my views on academic freedom. I have discovered this concept while working here at the University of Academic Freedom. And so I use it on them. But I guess you could say I've been in community development all my life. I've never made a business of it. I've never made a study of it. I've been working with First Nations people all of my life, and only recently with the academic side of things. And I've noted all kinds of development from, especially from the federal government, Department of Indian Affairs, now Indigenous Affairs, that engaged community development and brought in experts from all over the continent of North America. In fact, I befriended one such person. He's been a friend of mine since the advent of that program. And it continues to be a critic of what it is that governments and academics do as far as you know, the words that are used to describe voluntary and community development initiatives. So I'm somewhat critical about all of that. Not to say that it isn't good work or it isn't scholarly study. It simply means that I'm a doer. I'm not a talker, or I'm not an actor. And I've been rolling up my sleeves all my life doing things. I didn't need a study or an academic to tell me what needed to be done. And while that's useful, I have found that community development continues to be part of my life. And everything I do is voluntary, including my work at the University of Regina. Even though they pay me, it's almost akin to voluntary work that I do for the university, as compared to the academics who are well paid. So I just wanted to tell the voluntary people, like, I've done all that work all of my life in the voluntary sector. And call it what you want, call it community development, call it voluntary services. I continue to do a lot of that work, even in my spiritual life. I do a lot of things for people. For example, I also do work for the Regina Board of Education, in particularly with schools, and specifically one school in which there are 97% Indigenous students. And though the Board of Education has made certain policy directives to the administration about the core curriculum of student study, i.e. teaching the Cree language and cultural arts. And at the same time as saying that must be my signal. At the same time as doing that, the other side of that coin is, oh, by the way, you can't teach students how to pray in Cree. By the way, you can't take students out to ceremony. So on the one hand, to say, to utter beautiful words, and on the other, to forbid that kind of activity just seems to me to be the kind of situation that we're in with academic concepts and the actual work. The actual work that you people do. It's nice to have the benefit of those studies, but at the same time, you know what you need to do. You know your community. I know my community. I know what needs to be done. But there are always experts telling us how we should do it and how we shouldn't do it, and how to better do our work. So I say our community knows best, and we'll take it from them. Okay?
All right. Thank you. We will hear from all of our panelists, and then we'll come back and invite questions. About half of our time is available for questions from the audience. And our facilitator of the technology has reminded me we all should try to speak. It sounds to me like I'm being extremely loud when I'm speaking this close to the microphone. but I understand that our remote sites are not hearing us well unless we're putting the microphone very close to our mouth. So let's please do that. So next, invite Patricia Elliot to share her thoughts on the same set of questions and how she sees it.
Thank you. Is that working?
I don't hear you.
Can you hear me now? No.
Huh.
No, I think it's the mic. She's pretty close. Touch it. Oh, there. No.
Can you try Mr. Starblanket's?
I'll move over. How's that?
We can hear you.
I'll lean forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the question, how can the university contribute to community success? I think first and foremost by listening and learning about community problems and transferring some power. And for members of the university community, that can occur by actively engaging in community life and by inviting community members to come forward with their research needs and their learning needs, and by formally including them as the most important peers in peer review. Also asking them about that word success and what it means, and is it the success or the struggle that needs the most support. By understanding that working side by side with people to address community problems isn't non-traditional scholarship, which is what they call it, if you can believe it. Community engagement represents the essence of traditional scholarship and traditional ways of knowing and being. The whole sort of disembodied peer review, proliferation of journals is pretty recent in academic history, only of recent decades. By inviting community members into our classrooms, not just as guest speakers, but as guiders of the syllabus and student learning, to ask, what do we need to teach people in order to contribute to community success, meaning to ask the community that. By inviting community members deeper into the governance of our university, having a real voice and transferring some power outwards, which also means transferring some resources, financial or otherwise, so fair exchange, not taking. Finally, as a university community, understanding that community problems are our problems and successes are our successes, but also moreover that community struggles are our struggles. We can nab any number of million-dollar research grants, but if the community around us is suffering, we have failed. How can we work to meet all the needs, recognize the assets that we have to offer? We've got student and faculty researchers, events like this, the Community-Based Research Institute in August. We've got library services, units like the Community Research Unit, access to federal grants, which are increasingly calling for community partnerships. We've got facilities and maker spaces like meeting rooms in the Imp Lab. We have academic freedom, which is a beautiful thing. So we have to think about how to share these public assets more generously and creatively with the public. Also, we have to recognize the value of supporting community engagement. There was a US study that found 90% of scholars who self-identify as community-based researchers are women. So it's really not surprising that that work is undervalued. There was a survey we did in 2014 of U of R faculty members, and we found that we do have a really significant number of people on campus who understand and identify with community-based approaches in their research, which is great. But the majority said that community-based researchers are not in influential decision-making positions, and the majority reported that their community work is not well supported and recognized by the institution. So for our community partners, what that can mean is they're working with university researchers who are marginalized, and therefore that marginalizes the community projects, meaning there's fewer resources and faculty members who are sort of here today, gone tomorrow. So indeed, the whole metrics of success imposed on today's universities are in really many ways antithetical to community engagement. The departments, the research projects, even the individual scholars are expected to pay their way and generate financial surpluses, and that's not a recipe for community engagement. Still going good? Okay. The survey I mentioned was a baseline. 4 years have passed, and it would be good to conduct it again to see where progress has been made, and I would say particularly in the federated colleges. some factors identified in that survey then were, one was that the liberal arts, like political science, sociology, anthropology, journalism, justice studies, are the most significant sites of community engagement. So that doesn't mean that other faculties aren't important, but I think you could logically conclude from that the levels of support or non-support from government and from institutional leaders for the liberal arts should logically impact the degree to which our campus can actually do community engagement and engage with community members. Yet these are the very departments that are under constant pressure to justify their existence, to pay their way, and in fact, they are paying their way in terms of community involvement and support, which is like the one good that supports the whole university, and we can't afford to lose. So I say let's value that and let's invest in that. Is that 5 minutes yet?
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Again, we'll be coming back to ask some questions in a few minutes. Let's turn to Bettina Schneider, and let me ask you to share your observations. What would you have to say?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, just making sure my mic's working here.
Yeah, thanks for pulling it close to your mouth.
So I just want to begin by, again, thanking everyone for the opportunity to be here. I want to say thank you to Noel for the prayer this afternoon to start us out, and also Langan as well for the smudging. And I certainly want to, thank Patricia for what Noel for what they've shared, because I couldn't agree more with everything that you've brought forth today. So I'll try not to be redundant, or I'm going to try to add to the one thing I do want to, I guess, begin with is certainly just an acknowledgement of Noel and Langan and the way we began. It's just the importance of bringing our heart and spirit into everything we do. And I think that most of us are here today because that's, what drove us careers and the paths we've pursued. I certainly know that to be the case for myself. And I think that, that's one big step in terms of how we, university can contribute to community success, is to work with that a thinking heart, as my mentor used to at UC Davis used to always say, you have a thinking heart, and use that in terms of how you move forward in your work. And the way we write, we communicate, that's so, to me, there's often not enough of that heart and spirit in the way academics write, and that I think ties in with much of what I know David mentioned before. We have to approach that. The university has to approach the way we try to share our work with that heart and spirit in mind. We have to, I think very much as researchers at the university, we're here to help communicate the voices of the people we work with, and our research participants, and the communities we're here to serve. And the problem often is we're not communicating in a way that's accessible to the people we are working with and serving. And so that's a critical problem that I know many academics are trying to change, maybe not enough of us. And so we're certainly, that's I think one critical way we have to transform the university, because we're not meant to be an ivory tower. We're not meant to be disconnected from the community. We're here to serve that community. That's first and foremost, right, to everything we do. And so so for me, very much so, we have to transform our language. We have to connect and ensure we're working to bring those voices, community voices, to the forefront. I've worked, I think about where I got my start here, in terms of my career, and I think actually it started with the nonprofit community. I started as a community development intern for a housing fund, a community development financial institution, actually in New York, and that gave me kind of that first step towards working, there to serve the community, because certainly it's been a passion of mine from a very early age. And the, you know, from different experiences I had early on in my life. And so the nonprofit community kept coming back and back into my life as I interweaved between university and working. And then I went on to Davis, California, and into the community development graduate program. And that program was all about working with the community, of course. So we were constantly engaging with the nonprofit sector. And one of the most, incredible opportunities I had was being an intern again through, with First Nations nonprofits in the United States. And that set in motion so many incredible opportunities in my life. And so, again, there was that engagement between the nonprofit sector and university. And certainly one thing that I think is critical is to create more of those opportunities for students to work with the nonprofit sector, to serve the nonprofit sector through their education, and that it could be through internships, better evaluation tools that actually are creating projects and assignments that actually serve organizations and make an impact in the community. And so, these are, just a few things that I've seen, I want to see more of, those opportunities that came through, working with the First Nations Development Institute and First Nations Owista Corporation, it led to so much. One thing it certainly led to was a dialogue, an incredible dialogue that we had, and information sharing. And so much of the work I was doing at that time on Native and Aboriginal financial institutions, I was able to share with those organizations, those nonprofits, and they were able to share with me so much information that I was using to help, move forward my research. And it was just this incredible exchange. And certainly, one thing that David said earlier that I really loved is that I think I see university absolutely as a catalyst, right? We're here to hopefully create those opportunities, create these reactions out there that will hopefully lead to incredible change and movement and within the community. And so, I've seen that within the university, and I think that's one way we absolutely can contribute to success is making those connections and bringing people together and sharing information. And even though we might have to step away from it, right? The process, the fact that we've helped to create movement forward is incredible. So, there's so many ways we can contribute to success and meet the needs of communities. But first and foremost, it begins with listening and those voices. And I think that, the urban, I'll leave off with this because I probably only have, right, okay. The Urban Aboriginal Knowledge Network, I worked with them back in 2012, 13. I was part of a 5-year project. It was a SSHRC-funded project. And that Urban Aboriginal Knowledge Network, it provided funding, first of all, for work that I was doing with the Friendship Center here in town, the Nuwa-Utina Friendship Center. And the critical part of the research that the network funded was that the research had to be community driven. It had to come from the communities themselves. It had to come from the needs of different nonprofits and community organizations, friendship centers. And so just really briefly, the principles of that community-driven model, right, really emphasized research is grounded in community priorities and constructed or designed collaboratively, right, between communities and researchers. Research is respectful. And in our case, right, it's particularly working with Indigenous communities, it's respectful of Indigenous communities and people's languages, cultural protocols, values, life cycles, and genders, that it's respectful of Indigenous people's research approaches and protocols, that Aboriginal peoples and organizations will be an active participant in the research process at the level of their choosing, and that, we used essentially ownership, control, access, and possession principles, right, to guide us as well in terms of the work we did. And that led me to going to the Friendship Center and saying, what do you guys need? Where are you at right now? What is it that I could do here to help in terms of, bringing together a research project that is going to help serve your community. And that just led to the most incredible synergies and opportunities. And before we knew it, we did a series of culturally relevant financial literacy workshops, and those workshops then led to a totally new university class on personal finance and financial literacy, focused on very much Indigenous content and serving our students, and just so much has come from just listening and listening to what the priorities are in the community. So I'll leave it off at that. Sorry if I've gone a little long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, and now let's hear from Rhonda Rosenberg. Rhonda? Oh,
Am I working? There we go. I think you're going to hear some more echoes, both from David's talk and from my colleagues at the table. Hopefully there's some new angles, maybe. I also want to start really with the idea of relationships, that all of what we do is really about building relationships. And when we think about university and community organization partnerships, those relationships must be mutually beneficial. They must be good both for the university partners and for the communities and the organizations that they're choosing to work with, or that are working together. Capacity needs to be built in both types of organizations. There needs to be recognition that there is knowledge, expertise, and connections on all the sides, on everybody who's coming together. And that really needs to be recognized. Sometimes from the community perspective, we feel like that there are academics who approach us as they have all the knowledge or the capacity for doing research. And we're like, hey, there are things we really know about, and that needs to be respected. We also need to be aware of power and privilege dynamics and how those work and can have an impact. And we need to make them visible in order to really have respectful, equal relationships. We need to make sure that nobody is taking over, but that everybody involved, each partner is involved in defining the relationship and understanding that that's an ongoing process, that definition of the relationship doesn't just happen once. Although I would also like to say that it's really helpful to have partnership contracts and have things clear and written out with an awareness that there may be shifting as we work along, and that as we develop, there might be changes in what that looks like. There needs to be willingness to do things differently from the way that we're used to doing things. And so that might be in the time that we hold meetings, in the ways that we hold meetings. And I also want to thank Elder Noel and Langan for sharing cultural, traditional, spiritual practices today. That's a new thing that's coming into community and academic practice that, relatively in the last couple of years, that it's becoming normalized. And so we are able to change, and we're able to think about different ways of doing things, different ways of building an agenda, different ways of composing committees. To think about, are there colonial or other structures that feel like barriers to some people's participation? And how do we address those? How do we get over those? I had an allocations committee meeting yesterday looking at funding, and one of the comments from committee members are, that actually is from ARPERG, a university organization. They're accounting for childcare in this project. We like that. That's thinking about barriers. I talked about that. And then some of the things that, from my perspective, that universities can really offer to help contribute to community success. Research is an area in which we're really interested in. It's useful to us, and it's about helping us to do the research that we need data on. We often really need data especially to access funding and to do advocacy. Those are often the two primary, and actually to serve the people that we need to better. To support our capacity for research, though, not just to we've heard this today, not just to use us for research and walk away with it, but support our capacity and our involvement in it. And then I showed Brenda, my words almost echoed David's. I had down, translate academic research into easily digestible bits for busy nonprofit professionals, right? We really need that because we don't have time to read academic articles. And many of us, it's been a while since we've been engaged heavily in academic classes. And so even the language we need help with that. That is helpful to us. And then I think, as I was sitting, I thought also help to translate our knowledge back to the academy so that what we know, because we know things, that what we know can come back. Evaluation is another area, and MCAS has worked with both a consultant who's not with a university and with a U of S professor on evaluation. And in both cases, they really worked with us to enhance our capacity to do evaluation. And I will try to go through. Okay, we need access to students, faculty, and staff sometimes to do programming or to get information, access to resources. Sometimes access to space at reasonable rates. And at U of R, parking is always an issue. So thank you for offering parking today. Sometimes it's about having, including food choices that can meet a variety of dietary needs. Access to courses at affordable prices for professional development. I love the idea of grad level courses that community professionals can be part of. Advocating for funding for us too, helping us in that way. That's always a struggle. And finally, a couple of points around how to work to meet all of the needs of our community. Leadership and decision-making positions in all kinds of organizations, including universities, need to reflect the community's diversity. And in order to have that happen, that can't just be instant, but we need to nurture young leaders. We need to nurture leadership development among a diverse set of potential candidates in order to help them move into those decision-making positions. This is a really super key point. And then I think coming right back to the idea of relationships, meeting with community organizations, participants, and clients, leading to learning about community perceptions and needs, and even to foster future university students who might not have seen themselves in that way. Sometimes that relationship, having university people involved, can mean that people who had not seen themselves as being here might in the future. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, we have some time left, and I certainly have questions I could ask, but I don't want to take the time when there are members of the audience who certainly might have questions. Do we have one, sir? Let's get to Humphrey. Do you have the microphone? We're double and triple booking his time here.
I just want to make a comment and ask a question.
Please hold your mic close.
Sure.
Because the folks on
Sure.
remote.
The greatest university in the world of all time was the University of Socrates. Think about it, the university. What did he create? Excitement of ideas coming to us even today. There's nothing more exciting. He produced some of the greatest students who became Plato and Aristotle and all that kind of stuff. And I just want to ask the question, how have we changed from that time till today? Thank you.
Great question. Panelists, what do you think? In 20 words or less. No. I don't know. Patricia, do you have a thought? You look like you have.
Well, one small thought. I mean, that's what I was saying about what really is the definition of traditional scholarship. We are told there's a model now that is the brownie points you mentioned. But is that really what it's all about and where we want to be with universities? And maybe it's time to start challenging those terms that we have to live within.
Okay, Rhonda, it looks like you have a thought.
I have a little thought. My little thought is who has access to the university has changed. So in those days, there were no women, right? Women were not their minds were not considered able to even have high-level intellectual conversations. So we and certainly cultural diversity wouldn't have been included. So who's part of the conversation has changed since those days.
Bettina, you have a thought?
So I think I'd like to just probably add a bit to, I appreciate what both Patricia and Rhonda have said, and I think that, I'd like to add, how can it continue to change and build on a bit of what Patricia was getting at, in that, right now we're at this kind of, I think a bit of a juncture, turning point within universities, and by that I mean we need to start to, I think, change a bit of the model in terms of how faculty are evaluated and what counts and what doesn't count. Serving community, working for community, working with nonprofits, looking at, whether it's research that is benefiting those nonprofits or other community organizations, reports versus peer-reviewed articles as and other such publications as the only kind of way to move forward, right? And I know that at First Nations University, one thing I love about working there is we tend to, I think, embrace that work with community and value it as we, in terms of the faculty and instructors there. And that's a beautiful thing. It's I think, something I'm grateful for, because for me, my passion is working with community and serving community, and I love writing, but I want to see that go somewhere. I want to see it go somewhere, and I think that is, if we as universities can try to change that model of what, of how instructors and faculty can move forward and honor other ways, right, than simply what has traditionally been acknowledged, then I think we're getting somewhere.
Thank you. It's a very intriguing question. Thank you for bringing that up. Elder Noel, is there anything you would have to say about that conversation question? Well, he's just wondering about the tradition of inquiry that Socrates and that ancient civilization brought. Where are we today? And I think the discussion of how and who has productive conversations may be part of this. Perhaps you could reflect on it in the context as well of your observation about where can the academics, in your experience, add value in community, given, you've articulated where they're maybe missing the mark, or even maybe, you didn't say this, but wasting time. But where are the most fruitful opportunities for that dialogue with the practice community and the academics? I think we have to move the other mic. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I found keynote speakers' points about how to assist voluntary organizations to be very helpful in terms of proposal writing. University academics are very good at proposal writing. Hire them to do that voluntarily. And then the other thing is organizational behavior. We, in particular, within First Nations organizations, are only now entering that field, and we have had a lot of difficulty with regard to, because we're attempting to work in an environment that's foreign to us, that is a non-Indigenous environment. We sometimes have difficulty with some of those concepts. And so that would be very helpful. And but I don't want to put the academics in the same boat as the Department of Indigenous Affairs. But it seems that there are experts that if their credentials are utilized to the greatest efficiency for nonprofit organizations, that would be most beneficial. Like I said, we don't need experts to tell us what to do or what the needs are. We need experts to help us develop our capacity. So that's what I wanted to add to this.
Thank you. Appreciate that. We probably have time for one more question, and then we will, Dean Griefenhagen will tell you whether you've earned a break or not. So, sorry, I shouldn't put him on the spot.
Hi there. Thank you very much for everything that you've offered so far. I have a question, just a point to make. A few of you talked a little bit about the university communicating and getting kind of outreach to those who we have these services for and can provide these services for that are amenities and something that some sort of support for the community. How would you evaluate how the university is doing in communicating that? And how would you go about improving that communication in the future?
Okay. I don't know if we're handing out grades here, but give it a shot and explain why.
Okay, so just to clarify, so how we're doing communicating with the nonprofit sector, with a larger community about the work that's being done, research, community-based research.
Yeah, that's good. Speak directly into the mic.
Both with other not-for-profits, how we can build this synergy, and then also having those who we're answering the need for, knowing of these services and can provide to them. Kind of the two different aspects of communicating that. Yeah.
Well, I'll you know, how we're doing communicating right now. I mean, I'd say that I'll speak obviously just from what I see at First Nations University. I see us building, you know, many networks with a nonprofit community. I think we have a number of really close relationships, and you know, and it goes certainly, you know, we really, I think, try our best to meet on a regular basis with, you know, bands, tribal councils, you know, larger nonprofits that are not just in Regina, throughout Saskatoon, PA, where our campuses are based. The relationships, you know, as Rhonda was referring to, are, you know, we building those relationships is a priority, and that's the first step, right? So, you know, making sure that there's, you know, regular communication, regular meetings. I think that we often try our best to do that. That's where we'll often have that information shared, right? And in terms of, you know, in terms of the, you know, actual sharing of research information, right? That really takes place, I think, with the individual researchers versus, you know, the larger, you know, university, right? We have often our, you know, kind of key lead researchers who are working with different nonprofits, and they're the ones who are in that role of kind of really maintaining the relationships, communicating, you know, what's being done. I think for me, it's hard to speak for everyone. I can speak for myself. I can speak for, you know, my close colleagues in terms of what they're doing. I think that not enough is being done. You know, often I'll say that. I think there's not enough communication. I think there's not enough of a priority placed on on taking, again, that direction from the community. I think, you know, part of the problem with the system that we have here, and this ties back a little bit to the previous question, is that it's easy enough to say, you know, you're doing work with this community or that community, that you're doing this research project, but you know, is it something to check off on a CV, or is it something that you're actually long-term committed to, and you know, is that long-term relationship a priority? I'd say for a lot of my colleagues that is, and it takes it's an everyday you know, struggle to ensure that those relationships are maintained, right? Relationships take constant work. And so I think for myself, you know, with the partnerships that I value, you know, it's constant communication, it's constant checking in, and that's not always easy, right? When you have a million different administrative priorities or other things that come into play, but I think that you know, if the effort's there, then you know, and again, that thinking heart's there, right? That you know, that will guide you in terms of ensuring that communication is always there, and that, you know, as I said, I think a challenge always is that there are many people here who will say that they're doing this work, you know, on behalf of communities, on behalf of Indigenous communities, and it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. It's a lot of we're here, but they're not truly committed. They're not communicating on a regular basis, and it's more of a, you know, a career advancement opportunity than it is, you know, really about the communities themselves. So
I think with that, we're going to have to conclude this session. Please join me in thanking our panelists for their contributions. Dean Griffenhagen will now tell you what's afoot.
Well, I considered carefully, and I guess you deserve a break. So I'll have a break for about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. I think the refreshments have been renewed. Yes? Okay. And there are, remember, the tables with the different voluntary and nonprofit organizations back there. They'd love to have you come and speak to them and visit their booths too. I'll see you back in 15 minutes.